For the parents, they're cheering. We're hearing amens. I can hear it now.
It would be crazy for me to not get this job. Well, I didn't get the job.
But really, a good mentor can lovingly curse you out.
Yes.
They can lovingly set you straight.
Yeah.
And I think we need that.
I used to be real quiet, stay to myself. I
Okay.
didn't really want to get out and talk. It's like I did, but I was too shy to,
Yeah.
kind of open up. But you have to get yourself out there, because if you don't get yourself out there and meet new people and create these relationships and build with people, you're not going to find any advice. You're not
Yeah.
going to find people to say, hey, I want to invest in you.
1, 2, 3, 4.
What's going on, everybody? Donovan Daniel here from IUP, and this is a Crimson Conversation. I'm joined here by my friend and colleague, Adam Jones, and today's conversation is going to be about mentorship. So, Adam, why don't we get started right away with just talking about how we define a mentor? What is a mentor?
Sure. So, a mentor is a person who can tell you no. A person who can hold you accountable and that you can go to. I like to think about, when I look for a mentor, I look for somebody who has life experience. It doesn't necessarily mean they're older than me. That might be where you kind of go to first when you think about life experience. But it's like, I like to think about, I've got kids, right? And if I go to a pediatrician, I want that pediatrician to have kids or have had kids at some point in time in their life. Not that you can't learn a lot from books, or there aren't other ways to learn about children than having kids yourself. It just gives me a sense of comfort in knowing that I'm entrusting my children to someone who has raised children.
They might have a level of empathy because they got woken up from a tummy ache or a
Right.
sore tooth, and now you're coming in and they're like, you know what, I could be a little bit more sensitive
Yes.
because of that. Yeah, I can dig it.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm looking for when I'm looking
Yeah.
for a mentor. Yeah, like I said, accountability, life experience, and just someone you can turn to no matter what.
Yeah, I'll build on that in saying, like, because I love all of those, that I think it needs to be somebody who loves me, right? And I don't mean it in a romantic way, but just someone who really cares about me, and wants to see me well, wants to do well by me. I think also somebody who can see who I am capable of being way before I can.
Yes.
Sometimes my circumstances will hinder my ability to see myself clearly. But that person's on the outside and they could look at me and they could say, you know what, I could see what Donovan or what Adam or whoever, I can see what they're capable of becoming, and I want to help them become that. So I won't get caught up with who they are now. I won't be caught up in just giving them compliments. I'm going to push them because I can see who they could become. I think that'd be a dope way to describe mentor, at least for me.
Yeah, sure. And that makes me think of something I've heard you say recently, that sometimes your mentor is a team of people, not just one person. And what especially makes me think of that is, when you're building a team, you want people who can see different things.
Yeah.
And any one mentor is not going to see everything. Maybe there is that perfect mentor out there, but I haven't found that person. But what I have found is I can go to this person because they see from this angle, and I can go to this person because they can see from another angle. And when I get all of those different views of what's going on in my life, the things that they see, that helps to improve me overall and make me a better person.
And you have an interesting lens with that. We didn't start the video talking about what you do on campus, but you have a job that most students maybe, or I should say, one of your hats is one that students don't necessarily want to interact with,
Sure.
right? But I think it plays into the accountability piece and to set a standard. So tell us a little bit about what you do on campus, and maybe end with that thing that we're alluding to.
So I'm the director of student support and community standards, and probably the most important function of the roles that I play on campus is in terms of writing and enforcing the university community standards policy. And so, what I do want students to hear is, yes, we do have policy. Yes, you are going to have somebody who's going to hold you to that policy. But we do it in a compassionate way. We do it in a way that, we listen to students, we look at the context of situations, we don't make assumptions, or I should say we make a concerted effort not to make assumptions about what may or may not have happened. And through that, through the accountability structures in place, we're able to help students grow through a process that's intended to be a speed bump, not a roadblock.
Yeah.
It should slow you down a little bit. It should cause you to say, okay, maybe I'm not making some of the best decisions right now. And that's accountability. That's what, I talk about in mentorship. It's an extremely important part of human development. Any stage of development, we need boundaries that help us to see what direction we should be going to improve ourselves, to improve our communities. And that's really what the community standards process is all about, holding people accountable within the boundaries of the policy.
And that's not going to sound popular, right?
No.
Our audience today is high school students. Our audience today is their parents. And so for the parents, they're cheering. We're hearing amens. I can hear it now from where we sit. From the students, it's going to be like, hey, I've come to college so that I could be an adult, so that I can be independent, so I could be free. But the thing you got to know is being an adult is all about meeting expectations and honoring standards.
Yeah.
Like children do whatever they want and then they're reined in. But adults know there's an expectation that I need to abide by so that everyone can have the best experience. And so we're going to hold you to that. Not just Adam, but all of us on campus are going to hold you to, hey, the collective health of all of IUP is too important to let you go about unchecked.
Right. And there is a freedom experienced within boundaries. We don't often think about it that way. We look at it and we think it's confining. But well-set boundaries allow you to experience freedom as you develop, as you grow, as you increase your independence. Just take some time to reflect on that. It's a little bit backwards for a lot of us to think of it that way, but there really is freedom within boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, we set speed limits, right? Because we know that if a vehicle goes above that speed on certain terrain and certain turns, the risk of injury or death is too high.
Right.
So we're setting standards on our campus, not because we think you're going to die, but rather because we want to make sure that your experience at IUP is the least risky, the least dangerous possible, right? And so be mindful of that whenever you hear about community standards when you come to IUP. So, Adam, are there a lot of ways, because I want to, kind of shift back to our original topic of mentorship, are there a lot of ways that a student could find a mentor on campus, or is there just one?
Sure, that's a good question. We actually have several programs in place across campus. I'm not even going to try to name them because there's so many, to the point where every single student on this campus has an opportunity, has somebody, at least one person, assigned to them to help them through their time at IUP. That could become a mentor, but it not necessarily. And so those are programs, those are structures. And sometimes that's where you're going to find the person that you need. But sometimes you do have to go out and find that person. And sometimes it's that professor that you connect with your first semester on campus. Sometimes it's the RA in your residence hall. Sometimes it's just that friend that you meet randomly in the middle of the Oak Grove, because you have a common interest, and all of a sudden now you've got this mentor who's gone before you who can help you through. So really what I would encourage students to do is just to kind of keep your eyes open, be thinking about that. There's going to be people reaching out to you from all areas of campus, and there's going to be that person that just kind of walks into your life, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's my mentor.
Yeah, they stick out. And we'll spend a little bit of time talking about what that looks like as this conversation goes on, for sure. So one of the great ways that a student can find support on our campus is a program that you work with really closely, the Guides program. And so I wanted to take some time to talk about that, because I think students coming in, they might get emails about it, right? But if you have a little bit more context, maybe they'll appreciate it more. So tell me a little bit about the Guides program.
Yeah. So the Guide program essentially started because we recognized that there's a lot of resources for higher achieving students, and there's a lot of resources for immediately in place for students who maybe need a little extra boost.
Yeah.
But there was not really anything that was targeting the students kind of in the middle. Like, hey, I'm okay. I'm doing fine academically. I'm doing fine in most areas of my life. And what we noticed was that students are kind of falling through the cracks from that middle area. And so the guide program was started primarily to close that gap.
Wow.
And to provide every single student on campus with at least one person that they can turn to with anything that they need. So the way it works is ridiculously simple, really.
Yeah.
Every single incoming student, new and transfer students and graduate students are distributed amongst volunteer faculty, staff, and administrators who simply reach out to their group of students. They're going to send emails. They're going to offer meetups in their offices or in the dining hall or things like that. And they're just going to be there for the students. So the one of the key words that I said that I want to highlight and jump back to is that these are volunteer. This is not a part of anyone's job description.
Yeah.
These are folks like you and me, and several of the folks sitting around us here working in some of these offices who are volunteering their time, extra above and beyond their work responsibilities to serve these students.
I love that. I mean, because right now we're in the Center for Career and Professional Development Center, and I know a lot of our colleagues inside the CPDC are guides.
Yes.
And it's definitely not a part of a job description, but it just makes sense. It's a natural outflow of what we already do. In this center, we're helping students to find internships. We're helping students with, we're literally outside of this frame is a mock interview room occupied by some students right now, right? And so people in this office are perfectly aligned with the guides program, and it makes sense for them to just say, hey, I'm going to take what I know and I'm just going to offer some guidance.
Right.
I don't know everything, but I'm
Right.
going to offer what I can. And when I don't know something, I'll point you to another resource. So I love that. And I am a guide myself, and I find it to be a really cool way to help with retention on campus, even though my primary function is to recruit students. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. It's really a natural outflowing for all employees at the university. We're all here for students. We're all here because of students.
Yeah.
And so for any one of us, it totally makes sense whether it's a custodian or, the chief marketing officer.
Yeah.
It totally makes sense for that person to be a guide serving the students.
Absolutely. I guess the only requirement is, do you care about students?
Exactly.
And are you willing to send 3 emails a semester minimum, right?
Yeah.
If you want to go walk dogs together with your mentees, cool, but you don't have to, right? Yeah, I can dig that. I love that.
Yeah.
No conversation about mentorship should be missing the fact that we've had interactions with our mentors that were probably kind of funny or embarrassing.
Absolutely.
Because I think that sometimes people think that their relationship with their mentor is always going to be perfect. They're always going to look impressive. Their mentor is always going to tell them what they want to hear. It's really not that at all. So Adam, tell me about one of your mentors and how they may have held you accountable or said something you didn't like.
Sure, yeah. So probably no surprises to hear this, but when I was 22, I was pretty arrogant. I thought I knew everything. I thought the most of myself, we'll put it that way. I was not humble in the slightest. And I had the director of residence life at my undergrad. I was really close with. I'd worked closely with her for a number of years, Dr. Liz Akuma. And when I graduated, I applied to work at my undergrad. And I thought for sure I was a shoo-in for this job. Like, nobody knows more about this place than I do. Nobody cares more about this place than I do. It would be crazy for me to not get this job. Well, I didn't get the job. I got turned down. And at first I was hurt.
Yeah.
I felt kind of betrayed.
Wait, so your mentor didn't give you the job?
She
is what
did
you're
not
saying?
give me the job. She said no to me. And like I said, it hurt. And it took me a number of years. It took me about 10 years, actually, because this was 18 years ago. It took me 10 years to realize that was actually the best thing she could have done for me in that moment.
How so?
If I had stayed at my undergrad, I was comfortable there, right? Yes, I was, a strong leader and everything like that, but I was comfortable. And she saw that what I needed most at that moment in my life was not to stay where I was comfortable, but was to be pushed out into a new place where I was uncomfortable and could be challenged in new ways. And she was 100% right. And I tell you, to this day, she is still one of my best cheerleaders.
Yeah.
We are in touch. I'm in the process of working towards my PhD, and she's my #1 cheerleader. She checks in with me at least once or twice a semester to make sure I'm staying on track with my coursework.
Awesome.
And I couldn't have asked for anything better in that moment when I was 22 years old than for her to say no to me.
Yeah, I think a good mentor, a good friend even, but we'll focus on mentor, needs to have prior authority to be able to tell you no, to be able to tell you hard stuff. If when you don't look good or when you're moving in a dangerous direction, they have to say, hey, is it okay if I share this with you? You're delaying guidance.
Right.
Right. And so Dr. Okuma didn't have to ask permission. It was just no.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
You're not the right fit.
Yes.
And in that moment, it probably hurt, but now you're going for your PhD, and maybe you don't do that in that version of your life. If you had been given that job, maybe you wouldn't. Right. So I think it's so cool, but we got to know that our mentors must have the freedom to tell us hard things.
Yes.
Yeah. So my mentor didn't deny me a job. Instead, my mentor fired me.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit reckless in undergrad. I also attended IUP, so I don't just recruit for the university. I attended here. And during undergrad, without getting into the details, I didn't always follow community standards.
Okay.
Bringing that back in, right? And so I think my mentor could notice that I wasn't living to the best, version of myself. And so I remember this was at a church. I was volunteering there. Right before service one day, Dr. Briscoe, for those who are watching this series, you're going to hear that name often. He's somebody that means a lot to me. But Dr. Briscoe says to me at the beginning of service, so Donovan, so glad you're here today. Before service gets started, I want to let you know we really appreciate you, but we're not going to be utilizing your services this semester. And he said, it's so sweet, Adam. Like, it was such a nice voice. He had a perfect body language, not aggressive. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I sat down and I enjoyed church, didn't storm out. I don't even think I realized I was fired yet. Like, it didn't hit me. Like, he said, I'm not going to use your services. I'm like, all right, I don't got to serve this week. Cool, I'll get the rest of my feet. And I sat down. It was like a week or two later that I went, wait a minute. Dr. Briscoe fired me. And he's still my guy to this day. I have questions about marriage. If I have questions about, things with my job, if I'm having trouble with a colleague, like I usually think to call him in my top 3 Rolodex. He's there. And he straight up fired me. He later gave me my job back, like a year later. But it's because I started to meet the standard that was clearly stated and I thought I was exempt from. But a good mentor does not allow you to be exempted from your potential, from expectations, from accountability. They can't do that, or they really don't love you.
Yeah, and I think too about the way that Dr. Briscoe addressed you. When I think about Liz and when I think about other mentors in my life, like a football coach I had in my undergrad and my first supervisor and my first professional job, they had that approach where they were holding you to a standard, but they were so gentle about it. They never treated me like I was less than human. And that has stuck with me to this day. And that is why, like I mentioned earlier, with community standards and accountability, it's those people's influence in my lives that have made me the leader that I am in community standards and ensuring that when students come into our process that they are treated respectfully. They are not treated like they're less than human. And that's what I love about mentorship. If you actually take a step back and look at your life, you can see all those key moments when people have spoken into your life and have influenced the way that you are today. That's what mentorship is all about.
It really is. It's somebody who's shaping you through accountability, through love, through intentionality, through consistency, seldom through anger.
Right.
I think sometimes we think anger has to be attached to accountability or like being mean-spirited. It really doesn't. It feels mean in the moment because you're not hearing what you want to hear. But really, a good mentor can lovingly curse you out.
Yes.
They can lovingly set you straight.
Yeah.
And I think we need that. And so if a person comes to IUP, rest assured, whether it be through the guides program, whether it be an academic advisor, it might be a peer. And if you've watched episode 1 of this series, I even stated it may be somebody who doesn't look like you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like if you're looking for somebody who looks like you and has all of your life experiences, that mentor may not be available at the university you choose. It may not be available here at IUP.
Right.
But that doesn't mean they don't care. You really got to find out, do they care about you? And if they don't match everything about your life experience or lived experience, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because they still might be able to give you insight into how you can live, as people say, your best life. So I am joined by another good friend of mine on campus, Dominique Allen, and you are a student at IUP. You are an amazing marketer. We'll get to that in a little bit. And we met actually at an event where students could potentially find a mentor. We met at IUP Day, or was it Winter Warm-Up? I'm trying to think. I think it was IUP Day.
I think it was IUP Day.
Yeah. And so like for those who are watching, you don't know what that is, but IUP Day is when all of the student organizations are in the KCAC, our arena where basketball happens, where the commencement and graduation ceremonies happen. And so we were at IUP Day. I was at a table and we just struck up a conversation, and you were telling me about some of the stuff you were involved with, how you like photography and everything else. You had all these different interests. And I found myself saying, I want to invest in her. Like, I want to help you grow, right? And so I think we kind of hit it off from there. And you're here today because I want to hear about how, you have found mentors in the past, how you see, the topic or the term mentor playing out in your life, and just about how you mentor students on campus. So we'll start with, how do you define a mentor? Like, what is a mentor to Dime?
Okay. I think a mentor to me is someone who gives great advice. And when I say great advice, it doesn't mean you're doing really well today or you're doing really well this year or this month. Great advice is you shouldn't be doing that, or that's not looking good for you. Somebody that is looking out for you and your well-being in the present and in the future.
Yeah.
So you can find that, and I think someone that gives great advice to you is not always somebody that you can find. Sometimes they just appear.
Yeah, absolutely. So. I mean, like, you weren't seeking me out in that moment. Not that I would classify myself as your mentor, but you weren't seeking me out at that moment. But it was something about you that made me think, spur of the moment, I want to invest in that person, right? It wasn't, I want to invest in that student, because I'm sure there's other people that invest in you. When we were talking that time, Dr. Turner was like 2 feet away. Dr. Turner is featured in our first episode of the Crimson Conversation series, and she's amazing. And so Dr. Turner was 2 feet away. If there was going to be a mentor and it was between me and Dr. Turner, it's Dr. Turner, right? Like, perfect for you, right? And yet there was something about us talking where I'm like, I want to invest in Dime. Like, I want to, it's like it's almost like wanting to invest in a company. Like, I want to invest in that person, right?
Yeah. And
so sometimes you don't expect it. And sometimes you do seek it out. How could someone find a mentor?
I think to find a mentor, it's hard to say, but you really have to put yourself out there.
Okay.
I'm an introvert, so I used to be real quiet.
Stop it. I don't even believe that.
I
now
am.
I'm turning my chair. Okay, go ahead.
I used to be real quiet, stay to myself.
Okay.
I didn't really want to get out and talk. It's like I did, but I was too shy to, kind of open up. But you have to get yourself out there, because if you don't get yourself out there and meet new people and create these relationships and build with people, you're not going to find any advice. You're not going to find people to say, hey, I want to invest in you.
Yeah.
So,
That's interesting, because you said I am an introvert, not I was. So you still identify that way, and yet you've managed to find mentors, because introverts can communicate. I think sometimes introverts get a bad rap, because and that's probably why I responded the way I did. We think of introverts as people that sit there, they read the book, and they're like that, and it's like, that's not what it is.
It's not.
How my wife explained it to me a few years ago was that For an introvert, it might be that it takes a little bit more energy for them to put themselves out there. And maybe for an extrovert, it's more so they get they feed off of, or if they put themselves out there, that's how they get their
Yes.
energy. So it's where you get it from
Yeah.
socially. It's not necessarily that being an extrovert is better than being an introvert. It's just that's who you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it takes a little bit of energy to put yourself out there. Have you found that you need to meet with your mentors often, or is it like no matter how many times you see that person, when you connect, they got that good advice for you?
It's kind of like no matter how many times I see that person.
Okay.
I like to, so I have a team as well.
Yeah.
I like to talk to my mentors accordingly.
Okay.
Basically, if I'm in a good mood, I might talk to 2 or 3 different people in a day, and
Yeah.
they might tell me something different. Hey, you're doing this good. I'm proud of you, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I might have a bad day where I might talk to another 2 or 3 people, and
Yeah.
I'm seeking advice and seeking guidance because I don't know which way to go. So.
Yeah, so we actually talked about that off site. So what Dime's alluding to is I think that you don't necessarily have one mentor, but you have mentors that specialize in different aspects of your life, right? And so I use the reference, and it's crazy that I always use this because I don't watch NASCAR, like I don't bang with it, but I use the reference of a pit crew. And so if you know anything about NASCAR, you know that when a car pulls into that little area in the pit, that they have somebody changing the tires. They got somebody putting air in them. They got somebody fixing the oil or making sure the oil's straight.
Yep.
They got somebody cleaning the windows, and everybody has a function.
job, exactly.
And they do that well, but they do it efficiently. And so I think mentors are kind of like that. I think you sell yourself short if you have one person, you think that one person's going to answer all of life's questions. That's a lot of pressure. You'd have made that person God all of a sudden, trying to make them have every aspect of your life on lock.
Yeah.
And so you might have a mentor who's academic.
Yeah.
You might have a mentor that's entrepreneurial in nature, and you have like your business interests. You might have one that helps you with romantic questions, but all the same, you could have a team of people, and how you pick them is, do they love me? Will they hold me accountable? Will they tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear?
Right.
Will they be patient? Like, those are the things we use to pick our team. So that's what you were alluding to. So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Who are some of the people on your team? Anybody on this campus?
A couple of people on
Okay.
campus and a couple of people off campus. So I got to go with my number one off campus first.
Of course, of course. It's your list.
Mike Black, he's my boss at Hyundai,
Okay.
at Delaney Hyundai. And though he is a great person to talk to, he checks me and puts me in my place every time.
Okay.
So he's definitely my number one. Jamal Gosa
Okay.
started creating higher standards. I talk to him often.
Yeah.
He gives me great advice as well. Emily Winder, Dr. Winder.
Okay.
She was first my professor,
Okay.
and later on, when I was like going through all this crazy stuff with school, I was like, "Can you just be my advisor?" And she was like, "Sure." And I never actually got to physically switch her to my advisor, but she gives me the best advice. Last semester, she just told me, "Hey, you probably are not going to graduate this May, but that's
Yeah.
okay because
Yeah.
we just need to do some things, readjust ourselves, and move on, and
Yeah.
graduate at a later time." So I would say those are really my top 3.
I can dig it. And I can pick out something with all of them. So like one, and we're going to talk about Jamal a little bit later, that's an IUP alum, good person, and he created a program that we'll get to a little bit later on in our conversation that is near and dear to you.
Yep.
With Dr. Winder, I love that you said that essentially they told you you're not going to graduate when you wanted to, and that could be something hard to deliver. But I take it that when Dr. Winder said it, it didn't break your spirit. Dr. Winder wasn't aiming at embarrassing you. It was just,
No.
let me give you this painful truth, and then here's how we move forward.
Right, exactly. That's exactly how it was. I was so like, I gotta graduate. And she was just like, you need to take your time because you're not even learning the content that you need to learn because you're rushing,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. And the thing is, we're in such a rush to become adults. Could I just make sure you understand? Like
Yeah.
6 months after you terminate your relationship with a university, either through graduation or leaving, you gotta pay them loans back.
I know. I
So,
got
like,
a friend that's like
yeah, listen, be rushing to get, look, you see these grays in my beard? Student loans, people? Okay, no, not the only reason, but one of them. And so it's so cool that Dr. Winder is like, hey, you don't have to rush out of this place. You're
Yeah.
growing here, so
Yeah.
continue to grow. That's amazing. And then you told me that you have a mentor off campus. So while IUP is going to provide opportunities for students to find mentors on campus, there's a lot of really cool people in this community that you could take advantage of. It might be an employer, it might be somebody at a cafe that you go to. So I love that you got people on campus and off. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
It helps a lot.
Yeah. So one of the mentors you mentioned, Dime, was Jamal Gosa, IUP alumnus Jamal Gosa. And I've worked with him in the past, good dude. So I want to know, how do you know Jamal, and how is his role in your life? Like, how's he impacted you?
Right. So I met Jamal through Creating Higher Standards, and later found out that we had a lot in common. But
Yeah.
I met him through Creating Higher Standards.
What's
and
Creating Higher Standards?
Creating Higher Standards is basically a mentorship program or group that we have here on campus, where we help students not fall through the cracks. We're trying to
Yeah.
get to the finish line. So
Yeah.
he founded that, and basically he wanted to see Black and brown students get to the finish line and graduate, essentially.
Yeah. And so,
So-
fun thing I know, well, not fun, but a thing I know about Jamal's story, 'cause he has such a powerful story, is that he was at IUP and then he went through academic struggles, right? And he subsequently left the university. A lot of people do that. Like, people don't realize only 22.5% of students who attend or attempt a 4-year degree actually finish on time.
Yeah.
Like, it's a small number.
Yeah.
That's not to scare anybody who's watching, but it's just a reality. And that's nationally.
is.
We're not talking about an IUP stat. Like, nationally, less than 25% of students finish on time. And so students struggle because it's a difficult thing we're trying to attain. It's a college degree. Jamal struggled, but what's great about his story is he came back to IUP. Not only did he finish his undergrad, got a master's. I think he's working on a doctorate, if I'm not mistaken.
so, yeah.
So Jamal's, he's that dude, right? And Creating Higher Standards was one of the things he
is.
created when he came back to campus. So you're still a part of it now.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I am. Creating Higher Standards is still on campus.
Okay.
Hopefully, it will still be on campus for a long time, because it's a great program, and I think a lot of students benefit from it.
Awesome. So Dime, you are a member of Creating Higher Standards. I see you on Instagram with your off-campus job. I see you doing stuff with your major. So you're everywhere, right? I think you have some advice for the people that are watching this episode and listening to this conversation. So what's one piece of advice? I know you got a bunch, but what's one
Okay.
that you would give students coming to IUP?
Okay, so I said this earlier, but I think it's worth saying again.
Yeah.
Put yourself out there.
Okay.
Whether that be on social media, whether that be going to IUP Day, or just walking into Oak Grove and talking to people. Put yourself out there. Let people know who you are, so that you can invest in people and they can invest in you as well.
I can dig it. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'll add to that, put yourself out there for sure. And because we're talking about mentorship, I said this earlier as well, but I think they need to hear it again. A mentor has to be someone who has authority to say stuff that's hard to you. Like, you mentioned it with Dr. Winder earlier, right? You didn't say, my former mentor was, because after she told me what I didn't want to hear, you said your mentor told you something hard. And so I
Yeah.
think a mentor has to be someone who is pre-authorized to say something that you may not like, but it's the best thing for you. And they're
Yeah.
saying it because they love you.
Absolutely.
Well-
Sometimes you don't even really need to formally give them permission. If you have that relationship,
Yeah.
you know that you can have those hard conversations.
Relationship allows accountability. I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for sitting in on our conversation about mentorship, our Crimson conversation. We're going to have a lot of other conversations in the coming months. But if you want to check out any of the videos you missed, we're going to have ability for you to look at that in the caption. So be looking for that. And thank you again for being a part of our conversation.